Hello, Internet. My name is Wingsum, and today I'm going to show you how I made this dice rolling tray. Look, it's got a possum on the front. So, I'm a huge nerd, and I love playing tabletop RPGs, specifically Dungeons & Dragons. I've been running a campaign for a few years now, and my sister and I even designed characters we'll never play because it's fun. Check out Roll Me a Hero, link below. Playing D&D means rolling a lot of dice. I've been rocking a leather tray for a while, but I wanted to see if I couldn't make my own upgraded version. So I designed one in CAD that could be propped open. It has a small tray for holding dice that aren't being rolled, a larger tray for rolling dice in, and a stand for holding a character sheet. Because I am who I am, I added on a bit of unnecessarily complicated aesthetic embellishment. This here is Paw Paw the Possum from Not Another D&D Podcast. If you're an actual play fan, I highly recommend this podcast. Emily, Murph, Caldwell, and Jake have entertained me during many a build, and their adventures are as funny as they are compelling. Quick disclaimer up top, this video is not meant to be instructional. Most of these materials I have never used before, and therefore will make mistakes. Also, I'm making 2 copies of the box, so if you see discrepancies between frames, it's because I forgot which box I'm filming. I'm using a laser cutter to cut everything because that's what I'm comfortable with and have access to. Unfortunately, it means I lost some of the detail pieces as they burned up in the laser cutter, but that's a later problem. The curved sides of the box are actually made up of stacks of flat pieces wood glued together. I want to stain some of the detail pieces of Paw Paw the Possum in another color, so I'm carefully removing those pieces before gluing the rest. As I mentioned before, I'm trying to color these parts of Paw Paw a different color, so I'm pre-staining the wood. It's fiddly work, and I'm glad I'm only going to have to do it once, right? So I made a mistake. I didn't account for how deep the barrel hinges are when I was designing the lid. Totally avoidable, but honestly kind of on brand for me. I'm solving this by very, very carefully making the holes a little deeper with the drill. While I have the drill out, I'll also be making the holes for the stands to connect through. It'll be clearer what I mean by this later in the process. I'm using a section of wooden dowel as the hinge for the stands on this lid. The dowel is glued in place on either end, while the center has a freely swinging stand. With the lid mostly constructed, I'm reinserting the detail sections of Paw Paw that I had taken out and pre-stained earlier. Eagle-eyed viewers may notice there are some crossbars here that never made it to the end. They were just unnecessary and ended up getting in the way while I was handling the box, so I got rid of them. To prepare the wood for staining, I'm sanding using progressively finer sandpaper. It's not in the shot, but I am wearing safety goggles and a mask during this process, and you should too if you do a similar project. I plan on adding a lining to the box, so I'm taping off areas where lining will go to keep the stain and finish off. Otherwise, things won't adhere properly. After leaving the stain on for a few minutes, I'm wiping off all the surfaces of the box and it leaves a lovely color. Remember when I thought I'd only have to do all this detail work once? Well, unfortunately, the process of staining the rest of the box has made the darker color less intense, so I'm painstakingly restaining all of the darker sections using a paintbrush. Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of I Messed Up the Hinge Spacing. You might be able to see here that I didn't put the hinge holes close enough to the edges of the box, which means that when I open it, it gets in its own way. My solution for this is to sand down approximately a 45-degree angle on the base of the box and the lid of the box, then sand and restain the areas. To give the box a glossy finish, I'm using polyurethane. I'm doing 3 coats, which might be a little overkill, but oh well. Between each coat, I'm resanding the whole thing with a fine 220 grit sandpaper. Each coat requires a couple hours of drying time, so I'm going to go take care of other things while I'm waiting for everything to dry. Back at the beginning of this process, I lost a bunch of the detail pieces of Paw Paw to the laser cutter. I'm fixing these by filling the empty holes with an epoxy resin. Remember to always do this type of work in an area with good ventilation. I found that after mixing the resin, you can carefully squeeze a bit into the various holes in the lid. It will naturally settle into these holes, so just wait a moment for it to settle before adding any more. I have this really beautiful leftover cloth from a sewing project that I'm doing. I want to line the box with it to keep the dice rolling clatter to a minimum. The thing about cloth is that it's actually pretty tricky to work with. I want it to stay flat in the bottom of the box, so I'm cutting out cardboard in the shape of the bottom of the box and wrapping the cloth around said cardboard. I need to make sure that the cutout cardboard is actually slightly smaller than the actual box to leave room for the cloth being wrapped around it. I actually regret my glue choice for affixing the cardboard to the cloth. It ended up drying in a really obvious way, but I don't really have the cloth to fix it, so it's just going to serve as a good reminder for the future to choose your glues carefully. With the polyurethane now dry, it's time to put it all together. First, I need to clean up the crud that gathered where the tape was. I have discovered my new favorite type of glue, and it is called contact cement. Basically, you smear it on the 2 surfaces you want to glue, probably in a much smaller quantity than I used here. Then you wait for 15 minutes for it to get tacky, and then you just press the 2 surfaces together. It works incredibly well, and it doesn't soak through cloth the way the other glues that I tried seem to. In the future, for any fabric glue work, I highly recommend contact cement. Before gluing this piece of cloth in, I'm making sure to poke through holes in the back to leave room for a stand connector that I'm using to keep the whole thing from splaying backwards. I'm using a little dab of resin here to fix the hinges in place. I think I probably should have made the holes for the hinges a little smaller and then really press fit them in, but the epoxy resin seems to work just fine. If you're going to do something similar, make sure to use it cautiously. You don't want to accidentally glue your hinges closed. Now, the whole box can kind of stay open on its own, but I want to be able to adjust the angle of the back, and it's also not that stable. So I'm finally going to show you what I meant by stand connectors that I kept mentioning throughout this video. I'm looping this 18 gauge wire through the box and attaching each end of the wire to the stands. It's going to create a kind of loop that will keep the stands from going all the way backwards. Each of the stands has a little hole in it, through which I'm going to poke that wire that I just looped around through the box. With the wire placement all done, I'm using a little more epoxy resin, dabbing it on the ends of the wires, and fixing them to the stands. Right, with the box done, let's see how she rolls. Oh my God. My God, did I learn a lot doing this project. First, you should always plan for spacing of your hardware, and importantly, you should test it on some scrap wood first, lest you end up like me, having to spontaneously sand down parts to make them fit. Next, if you want to have a multicolored design, I would suggest either keeping it simple and/or using 2 tones of wood from the start instead of having to do all the finicky staining that I did. Third, you should allow lots of time for sanding, staining, and finishing. Everything will take longer than you think it will, and everything needs lots of time to dry. Finally, if I were to do this project again, I would change the order of operations. I would do any resin work that I wanted to do first, so then I could sand off any excess resin, and then I would continue with the staining, sanding, adding polyurethane, all of that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I have some crafts projects and electronics projects coming up in the near future, and I will see you next time. Bye. Y'all, look at this absolute unit of a squirrel that I saw in New York City over Thanksgiving break. The city wildlife is truly majestic.